welcome to Reactivated, and as promised in Reactivated number 18, today it's a top 10 of controversial judges' decisions. Yes, controversial judges' decisions that should have gone the other way. Okay, we start in at number 10, of course, and let's get the most obvious one out of the way, I think, first. It is the Series 7 Grand Final between Storm 2 and Typhoon 2. I have covered this fight many times on Reactivated, but from a judge's decision point of view, I think this was a wrong decision. From the production point of view, Storm 2 was another pushing robot in a Grand Final, and for me, I think Storm 2 weren't liked a lot during Series 7 from the production point of view, and they were trying to do anything that they could to make Storm 2 lose. And with one tiny little bit of damage that Typhoon did, Typhoon weren't in control for most of that fight. They had to stop most of that fight because they kept smashing into the barrier. Storm 2 were much more aggressive, much more stylish. They were in control more. And for me, I think it was a bit of a trend, wasn't it? Grand Final fights weren't the best fights in the series, but for me the Series 7 Grand Final fight should have been awarded to Storm 2. That's in at number 10. Rewind all the way back to actually one of the very first judges' decisions ever made. It's Series 2 in the Heat Final, Demolition Demon versus Napalm. Probably the biggest controversial judges' decision in Series 2. I mean, really, what were the judges thinking of? Demolition Demon were pushing Napalm into the corners, the PPZs. They were more aggressive. They even did a bit of damage to Napalm, of course. What's frustrating here is, at every judge's decision, damage always has swayed more than any other categories. And that was the biggest bit of damage that was done to Napalm in that series. And yet, Demolition Demon still lost. The crowd hated the decision, and Napalm limped into the semi-finals. But for me, Demolition Demon should have won that, no problem. At number 8 is a fight that came in Extreme 2 of the New Blood series. It's Pressure versus Piranha. Going into the fight, Piranha was tipped as the hot new contender. They even had Razor, the team of Razor, on their side, helping them out in the pits. And other than the first 10-20 seconds when Pressure pushed Piranha towards Matilda, Piranha dominated most of that fight. It had the aggression with its weird hammer, axe, saw thing. It's sort of a new style of weapon, wasn't it? Pushing Pressure into Shunt. Shunt did some of the damage as well. Pressure didn't really have an aggressive weapon. They had just a number of little flippers, didn't they, and the shovel at the front. Okay, they did use it, and towards the end of the fight you could maybe argue that Pressure was coming back on top. But for me, Piranha should have got the judge's decision. It was even controversial, wasn't it, when they announced it, and the teams also agreed that I think Piranha should have won that. And so do I. So there we go. Piranha should have won that fight. That's number 8. How I've never covered this particular judge's decision in the past on Reactivated, I don't know. I don't think I've even covered the controversy around it, but for this one, at number 7, takes place in Series 6, Wild Thing versus 259. I mean, going into the fight, 259 were the hot favourites, not just for the heat, but for the whole series. The devastating vertical flywheel was devastating. It destroyed its opponents in the first round, but then it got against Wild Thing. Wild Thing were the underdogs, even though they were seeded machine. And the fight, for me, ended after 259's initial attack. That first 10-20 seconds of bombardment and the onslaught and the power that 259 dished out against Wild Thing was immense, and we'd never seen anything like it. To me, the fight ended there. From then on, 259 lost its drive, lost its weapon, and it was really a bit of a pushing, shoving match, wasn't it? So I don't know what the judges were thinking of. That they should have judged the fight up to that point, because it was 6-1, wasn't it, after that? Okay, you could argue that 259 was immobilised at the end of the fight, but if you count down that last bit of the fight, 259 were only immobilised for about 26 seconds. Even Philippa was annoyed because she came down to the judges' table to say, why haven't you given it to 259? Because they really should have won that fight. Nobody in the crowd agreed either, and neither did Craig Charles. So, unlike what the judges said, that the robot 259 was immobilised for 30 seconds, it wasn't. So I don't know what they were thinking with that decision. Number 7. Now Wild Thing's come up again. If you think about it, Wild Thing, I think, was one of the luckiest robots to actually go through based on judges' decisions, because they spent pretty much all of Series 5 and 6 going through on judges' decisions. And for this one, we go back to Series 5 Heat Final, when Wild Thing came up against Prize Fighter. Prize Fighter was so much more aggressive. They flipped Wild Thing. They were on control, they were on top for at least 2 minutes of that fight. Okay, Wild Thing did come back towards the end and were probably more aggressive towards the end, but you've got to look at the fight overall. And for me, flipping Wild Thing so many times and being on top and just kept on at them throughout the fight, there was no question of why Prize Fighter shouldn't have made it through to the semi-finals. And again, the Prize Fighter team were very unhappy, so were the crowd, and Craig Charles didn't agree either. They were very lucky, Wild Thing, to escape. For me, Prize Fighter should have won that heat final. Who knows where they might have ended up. In at number 5, we go back to Series 3 and a heat semi-final between T2 and the Dark Destroyer. I just watched this heat quite recently again. I'm rewatching the entire series. Now, for me, this contradicts the Napalm and Demolition Demon fight, because the outcome of the result, of course, Dark Destroyer did win, but the judges commented that because it had the aggression with the weapon and the damage, it swung the decision for them, which is totally a different view of what happened against Napalm and Demolition Demon, because Demolition Demon did all the damage. T2 should have won this. They were aggressive, they were pushing Dark Destroyer around into towards Dead Metal, the House Robots, constantly at them. And at this point, really, in the series, if you didn't have a weapon and it went to a judge's decision, chances are you were going to lose. You had to have the weapon for the damage points. And unfortunately, T2 didn't have that weapon. But they still were on top for all that fight. And for me, Dark Destroyer should not have gone through. So T2 should have been up against Gravedigger in the heat final. Okay, Gravedigger still would have won. But T2 was definitely the stronger of the two between it and Dark Destroyer. We've so far left out many judges' decisions from Series 4, which I think probably caused the most controversy out of the whole era of Robot Wars, the decisions made in Series 4. So we're going to look at one particular decision in Heat C between Firestorm and Bolt, not Bot, Bolt from the Blue. Firestorm 2 for me was the worst incarnation of Firestorm. I have mentioned this briefly before in the past on Reactivated, but against Bot from the Blue actually looked the better robot going in. It had the lower ground clearance, it looked compact, low centre of gravity, and throughout the fight were on top. They were pushing, flipping Firestorm. Firestorm, okay, you might say that they had more aggression in the fight, but for me, Bot from the Blue got more of the flips in. They kept on going, of course. They didn't lose control, and for whatever reason, the judges sided with Firestorm 2. Into the top 3. And we are going to fast forward a couple of series to Series 7. And I have touched on this in a previous Reactivated episode. It is the heat final between Judge Shred 3 and Mute. Now, I've heard rumours that this fight was heavily edited, so what we actually saw on TV wasn't the true picture, which is why when you look back at this fight, Mute was seen to be all over the place, not in control. Judge Shred had the flips. Mute spent most of its time on its back, but because each fight is 5 minutes, we never get to see the full 5 minutes in the edited versions, do we? But the edited version does show Judge Dredd to be the better of the two. Mute, they didn't do anything. Okay, it looked spectacular when they flipped, but they got the gas pressure all wrong. They spent most of the fight on their back, and rightly so, the judges ruled in favour of Mute over the judges themselves in Judge Dredd. So, yes, I didn't agree at all with that decision. Judge Dredd should have won that heat final. Mute should have been muted. Simple as that. As we move on to number 2. And our next controversial judge's decision takes place, you guessed it, in Series 4. The runner-up, just missing out on the most controversial judge's decision ever, goes to Panic Attack and Stinger in the semi-final stage of the 4th series. For me, this was the biggest boo reaction from a crowd I think I've ever heard. Even after the fight had ended, when Craig was trying to interview Panic Attack, you could still hear the boos going on, because this, for me, was totally incorrect at the time. Watching back recently, I still think Panic Attack should have won, but it was a lot closer than it than it looked back when we watched it live. I think, for me, I personally think that the production team or the judges just didn't want Panic Attack going through, because it had already won, and they didn't want a previous finalist going through, a winner going through to the final again. Criteria is marked on being in control, and Stinger didn't like any kind of control in that fight. Okay, they may have been more aggressive, but Panic Attack did most of the pushing. Stinger being aggressive, of course, with its mace, but Panic Attack was more in control. It fed Stinger to the house robots, to the wall, tried to get it out of the arena. For me, Panic Attack should have made it through to its second grand final, and for that, I will never forgive the producers and the judges for ruining that for me. Should have been Panic Attack, Chaos 2, Pussycat and Hypnodisc. What a final that would have been. Let's move on to our number 1 spot. So you'll be probably thinking, well, what's topped all that? And this might not even clocked some of you thinking back, oh, what potentially could be number 1 spot for the most controversial judge's decision. But if you think about it, the more you think about this, it makes perfect sense. It comes in the UK versus Germany final match between Fluffy and Dapek. This is the only fight in the main draw, the main competition, that went to a draw. Judge's decision, and the judges made it a draw. Now you're looking, the whole point of this episode, UK versus Germany. So what do? They give both robots the winning spot. It's a draw. What the hell's that about? You want a winner. Let's just review the fight, shall we, and see for ourselves who should have won. So, Fluffy. For me already, they're on top because they have a weapon. Dapek only really acted as a pushing robot. It was invertible, but yeah, okay, well so was Fluffy. Fluffy's disc did break halfway through, but by then they'd done all the aggression and damage needed, and from then on it was a bit of a pushing match, wasn't it? But Fluffy, hands down, should have won. I'm not being biased, okay, but Fluffy should have won. And for whatever reason, the crowd hated it as well. It was a draw! What a way to end a competition like that. Didn't agree at all, like it at all. Thought it was the biggest anticlimax to any episode of Robot Wars. And so for me, that match takes the top spot for most controversial judges' decisions. So there you have it. Now, cease. Just in time, cease there. Now, before we go, have I missed a key fight? This is all I have from my memory of the series, so please, if I have missed anything, chances are I have, let me know in the comments below which controversial judge's decision made your top 10. Please let me know in the comments below. As ever, we love doing this. Please like, downloads, share, subscribe to the video. We'll be back very soon with more Reactivated, but until then, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.